hello there, St. Luke's. Good to be back with you all for this midweek message. I'm sitting here on Thursday, December 12th in the afternoon, just finding it hard to believe that Christmas is less than 2 weeks away. But there's a lot of church between now and then, so I'm really excited about that, I hope as you can imagine. But I do pray and hope that as we've been teaching and preaching about it, that something of the Advent season has you've been able to at least contemplate, if not actually sort of draw away and participate in, namely the sort of preparatory aspect of it, the contemplative, sort of prayerful aspect of it, because as I've been confessing myself in the various capacities, the concept of waiting until Christmas, the concept of Advent, of preparing, not full-throatedly celebrating Christmas in the weeks leading up to it, was a foreign concept to me. And still I sort of resisted it, and I still, to a large degree, have a hard time fully embracing it, perhaps in a way that the medieval saints did, or something like this. But nevertheless, I try, and I, to a large degree, have been able to do better on a yearly basis, although there's always room for improvement. But it is a foreign concept. It is quite countercultural, as I said. But it was the rhythm of the church for centuries, not millennia, to use this time of preparation for Christmas to contemplate the great and glorious day when He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and His kingdom will have no end. And so I was reminded about how just countercultural this was to my own life when Liza and I were in Berlin one Christmas Eve. We celebrated with a German family that we had befriended, and they didn't even put up their tree until Christmas Eve, and then traditionally left it up for 12 days, the final day being the final of the 12 days of Christmas being Epiphany on January 6th, where there was, again, the traditional Epiphany feast that was often marked by a bonfire of said green trees. And so we are going to do that, and so stay tuned. There'll be more about that in the upcoming weeks, but just suffice it to say, do not throw your tree away the day after Christmas. Anything that is living and green that you have up and around, then when you take it down, bring it to the church, and we will prepare for our now annual Epiphany bonfire on January 6th. So that we'll talk about that more later. But really, I only have two things to share with you today. And actually, I only have one. The other one is going to be about our Women's Christmas Luncheon, which you will hear directly from Jessica Maples, our Director of Women's Ministry, immediately following this segment of the Midweek Message. So stay tuned for that at the end. But what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of an update on the current status of our stewardship season. This is the end of the year, and I know that all churches and nonprofits and all the people are considering their budget, both for this year, hoping to meet their proposed budget this year, and looking ahead towards the next. And we are no different from anyone else. And so, but before I get to that update, I was inspired. I was reminded again by particularly our Advent speaker yesterday about the sort of the prescience of our campaign that, as many of you know, our season is that we entitled Equipping the Saints. Now, two of our three Advent speakers so far have been glorious. Last week, we had Sandra Bowden, and she gave a talk on The King Has Come. And this was a sort of a beautiful depiction of a real deep theological truth, which is that art and beauty can convey deep theological truths about God and humanity in a way that nothing else can. That there's a uniqueness, particularly to art, that speaks with a voice that is unparalleled in many ways and unique. And so we heard all about that. You can watch the video. We put it up already, and it's on this YouTube channel. Yesterday, we heard from Annie Crawford, who is a sort of cultural apologist and a she's just kind of a polymath, really. She has a lot of different wonderful sort of ideas and thoughts going on, and she came and spoke to us about juxtaposing or two things that before yesterday I had no idea had anything in direct relation, and that is namely the Genesis 11 account of the Tower of Babel and C.S. Lewis's, the third of his ransom trilogy called That Hideous Strength. Well, I want you to watch the video. I won't rehash the entire talk. It is, both of them are incredibly worth your time. I was deeply moved by both. But particularly yesterday, in light of this stewardship campaign named Equipping the Saints, I was deeply moved because the argument or the statement that C.S. Lewis was making in That Hideous Strength was that we are in a certain capacity in a cultural situation that mirrors, if not that reflects the same that was extant at the Tower of Babel, namely that on account of technological innovation and sort of a sort of belief structure that has moved away from worshiping God to the conception that perhaps we are in fact gods, we are in danger of the same sort of hubris that possessed the people in Genesis 11 that God had to scatter. And this is C.S. Lewis's, I don't want to give away the book, but suffice it to say there's hope at the end, but there is also a scattering, not unlike the Tower of Babel. And so I didn't know that Hideous Strength, the title of Lewis's book, is a reference to a 1555 poem where it talks about standing in the shadow of that hideous strength, the shadow being the Tower of Babel and its crumbling. So anyway, I need to go look for that poem, but suffice it to say, the answer to this was if we find ourselves, which I think it's safe to say, in a cultural moment the Lord has asked us to live in that is not, we should say, hospitable to the proclamation of Christian truths, if we find ourselves in a place where the sort of culture seems to be in a frazzled state, somewhat scattered, perhaps not unlike people felt during the time of the flood, right? And this is all part of her talk. Well, then what is the church's response to being frazzled and scattered and in the midst of a flood? Well, we build arks. That's what we do. And I just love that image. And so when she finally came and said that, I had a moment where I was really overcome with emotion, because that's precisely what we're doing here. You know, the arcs, they're saying the arc of the families, the arcs of the solid relationships, the arcs that are waterproof and seaworthy with respect to our understanding of who we are and who God is, and all the various things that will give us that will secure us in the middle of rough and windy weather, in the midst of flood, in the midst of scattering. And we look around us all the time and we see just this taking place, that in where people are despairing and hopeless, we find hopeful and resilient Christian people who, in the face of sickness and danger and persecution and cultural decline, in the midst of all the things that threaten to overwhelm, God has proven strong enough, his promise has proven steadfast enough. The foundation that has been able to stand, and Christian people in the church, by extension, will continue to do what we do, which is to be a city on a hill whose light cannot be hidden, to be salt and light for the dark and unsalted world. And so that's what we're doing. I was so encouraged by that, because that was in part what we have been communicating in our stewardship season, the equipping the saints. Paul says in Ephesians 4, that we are to equip the saints for the work of ministry. What is the work of ministry? It is simply the strength to stand, to proclaim, and to believe in the hope set before us, which will then be a beacon to a lost and hurting world of who God is and what He has done for us to save. I mean, I finished the letter, as you know, with a paragraph, as some of you know, and I was reminded this morning. I had coffee with a dear friend, and he said that was the best part of the letter, the end. I don't know if it was because he had gotten to the end or if he just thought that was the case, but at any rate, I was reminded, and it just really it nicely dovetails with this idea of being an ark, although I used the imagery of being a lighthouse. Some of you may remember this. It says, "Friends, we're at an inflection point both in our culture and in the life of our church, where we have the freedom and frankly the responsibility to remain a lighthouse in increasingly troubled seas, for the sake of the lost, the sustenance of the faithful, and the hope of generations to come. By God's grace and with your faithful sacrifice to Him of your time, talents, and treasure, we'll continue to watch the Lord work locally, nationally, and globally for the building up of His kingdom. Thanks be to God." Well, all of that is coming together, and is just sort of at the forefront of my mind during this discussion of the 2025 budget and our stewardship season. So I'm happy to report that as of now, we haven't received all of the pledges. Some of you who have pledged in the past have not yet fulfilled your pledge, and there's all sorts of reasons for that, which is fine. But we are prayerful and expectant that some of you who have contributed will continue to. But of the ones that we have received, around 50% of the pledges have been increased, which is a great joy. And as of now, the prognostication and the projection is that we are looking to come in about appropriately 10%. Well, the number 10% is figurative, but we are coming in about 10% below our projected budget. As you know, when I wrote in the stewardship letter that we were looking for about a 12% increase over last year. And that is an indication of what is taking place in the life of our church, which is that we're sort of gearing back up. We're reaching cruising altitude, but we're not there yet. And so we have a couple more gears to go through. And as I said, in the service on the sermon on Sunday, with the stewardship sermon, which I will link to, there are a lot of practical reasons why we need these increase. It's the two main buckets, as it were, are the personnel and the physical plant. And so there's a lot with respect to the physical plant, property or whatever the taxes are, insurance, things like this, upkeep, maintenance, that we can't really we don't have a lot of sort of leeway on that. And the other big bucket is personnel, and so we're endeavoring to sort of staff the team. We're going to increase our communications. We're going to do the work of ministry here for the size church that we have and the scope that we, by God's grace, will continue to have with respect to seeing His kingdom come, as I said in the letter, locally, nationally, and even globally, with all our various mission partners and outreaches and all sorts of things. So that's where we are. And so I want to, I told the executive committee when we talked that we would just make this need available and ask you to prayerfully consider the fact that we are, at the moment, about 10% below where we need to be. And so if you've already pledged, we're grateful for that. If you haven't pledged, well, then we pray that you would consider before the Lord. And above all, I have mentioned this, and I mentioned this again in the sermon, that there's as I said, practical reasons we need this for all sorts of the things you can imagine. I mean, mouths to feed and people to compensate and roofs to fix and all the things that go into the life of a family, which is what we are here. But the real sort of heart motivation I mentioned is what lies at the real sort of pastoral appeal for the life of good stewardship of our time, talent, and treasure. Because maybe 20 years ago I would have been less likely to speak so directly about this need, and I think that was in part because of naivete, perhaps. I think there's a little bit of the sense it was perhaps like improper, or it was impolite to speak about something so personal as your finances. But I think largely it was on account of cowardice. I think that I didn't have the conviction that it was as important as the Bible seems to make it. It seems to clearly show. That throughout the Old and New Testament we see that the allure, the power, and the seduction of wealth is a powerful sort of counterpoint to the peace that can only be found in trust in the Lord. And so there's a reason why God has given us means by which our grip is rest open from our reliance on wealth and money, and forced to have more of a reliance on Him because He knows how powerful that grip can be in the life of His children. And so He has indicated the first fruits of our labor are to be given back to Him as a grateful gift in recognition of our first things, our first priority, our first love. And so that's why I preached about, as many of you know, in the sermon, we give 10% of our pledged income, our budget, goes directly to the diocese. That's not a number that we shave off, and that's not a number that we reconsider, because that's the biblical standard, as I laid out, that the ACNA, the Anglican Church in North America, and frankly churches throughout history, have put as both the Old Testament standard, and for the Christian, the New Testament, as the goal is that would at least be the beginning point of a life of gratitude and return of thanks to God through the work of our hands. And so if you are in that position and it's a new concept to you, well then, there are provisions for that. There are ways to go from 1% to 1.5%, from 3% to 6%. I mean, you can make this decision on your own in your conscience before the Lord. But the goal and the hope and the from a pastoral and sort of discipleship sanctification level is that would be the trajectory. And so again, that is something between you and the Lord, but that is something that we are laying before you, and I personally am laying before you as a pastor and a priest and as someone that has the responsibility for shepherding, and we are as sheep, and I put myself in this category, of course, as well, need to be directed and need to be guided in the proper and God glorifying and honoring shepherding of our time, our talent, and our treasure. Okay, so that's where we are with that. And so if you have any particular questions, feel free to reach out. But suffice it to say, I pray that some of you towards this year end will prayerfully consider the need set before you, and we will be good stewards with whatever the Lord brings to us through the work of your hands, and we will look forward to presenting that budget to you ratified and ready to go at the annual meeting towards the end of January. But until then, we have some time set before you, so I again let you know the need, and we will work with what the Lord provides. Okay, that's about all I have, so I will leave you now. I've gone on long enough, and I'll let Jessica take it to the end. Take it away, Jessica.
Hello, ladies of St. Luke's. I'm so excited about this coming Sunday, December 15th, after the second service. We're having our women's Christmas luncheon. It seems like it's been a long time of preparation, but we are almost there. So just a couple things. Hopefully every one of you has registered. Well, I know that not all of you probably have, but as many of you have registered as possible. Last minute registration would be first thing tomorrow morning. So call or email or go online to register. Secondly, if you have a miniature Christmas tree, you can bring them either Friday afternoon between 2 and 4 or Saturday morning between 10 and noon. Bring them here to the church, and we will have them all set up. So what I wanted to tell y'all also about that is that we are bidding on these miniature Christmas trees on Sunday to benefit the Anglican Relief Development Fund. And I found out from them that there are a couple of families that are victims of Hurricane Helene up in North Carolina, and ARDF has helped those families move into 2 trailers and for temporary housing, because both of these families lost their homes during the hurricane. And our support will help them furnish those trailers with just extra supplies as needed. So that is exciting, that when you bid on these miniature Christmas trees, you are supporting a family in need up in North Carolina that were victims of Hurricane Helene. So anyways, I'm excited on Sunday to see you all at the Women's Christmas Luncheon. Bring your $15 if you haven't already. And get excited to have great food, a wonderful talk from the Reverend Joyce Harder. A skit is going to be done by the St. Luke's Players, and we will sing Christmas carols. It'll be fun. See you then. Merry Christmas early. See you then. Bye.